We have been trained to think of, hey, we have like one blockchain and everyone builds on this blockchain and it's supposed to scale to everyone in the world. But we always think, how do these systems have to look like if we 100x or 1000x users? It looks very much like Web 2 in terms of how scalability will be achieved. We have a hypothesis that every application should have their own blockchain.
Will we have like millions of rollups? Hi, this is Violetta Chekan, or VC. Indeed, I'm a venture capitalist, and I'm also your host of Web 2+1 with VC show. And today we have a very interesting guest who is Hilmar Orth, who is the founder of Gelato, which is building a rollup as a service platform. Hi, Hilmar. How are you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on my podcast. All right. So I would love to start with a very basic question, maybe, but how did you start the company and why Gelato? Is there any connection with Gelato as Italian name with ice cream?
Gelato was actually started in 2019 by my co-founder Luis and myself in Berlin. And we were ourselves engineers and developers trying to build DeFi applications back then. And at that time, DeFi was just starting out. There wasn't really much going on. And so we had some ideas around protocols we wanted to build. But what we really quickly realized is that actually building more sophisticated, scalable DeFi applications was pretty tough. There was only Ethereum as a blockchain to build your apps on. Ethereum was very slow. It was already at that point in time not that cheap. And there were a lot of developer tools missing around Ethereum that had to be built in order to actually make it much easier for developers to build, let's say, perpetual dexes, lending markets, exchanges, whatever we sort of take for granted today. And that's the point in time when my co-founder and myself decided to focus on helping developers build infrastructure that actually makes their life much easier into developing these applications that can at some point scale to millions of users all over the world. And yeah, this is how we then decided to start Gelato. And it was a sort of long road of trying to find the key problems at any given moment in time that developers had. We started out helping projects, for example, with all of the backend infrastructure for automating the transactions on chain. And we very quickly then realized that the key bottleneck that projects have is that they're still not scalable. So the blockchains like Ethereum or even a Solana or something else are not built to really enable thousands of applications to scale to millions and millions of users. And so we decided that we want to help solve this issue for all the developers without having them be like experts in like scaling and running blockchains themselves. And this is also how Gelato developed into becoming one of the leading rollup as a service providers in this space, because what we do basically is we have a hypothesis that every application should have their own blockchain, and we abstract away all the complexities for projects to launch their own rollup, their own blockchain on Gelato, which we sometimes refer to as like a cloud platform for Web3, similar to like what Google Cloud or like a Vercel or something do in Web 2. And yeah, the name Gelato, I think there are a lot of interesting stories. No one really knows where it comes from. There are a lot of rumors, but yeah, Gelato is like we are back then. We spent a lot of time coding and not being out there and having a fun time with friends. So we were locked into the basement and really trying to help build the future of Ethereum, and like the great moments we always had together outside at this Gelato store next to our co-working space in Berlin, where we went at a hot summer day to enjoy like a 15-minute break. And I think this is where some of the official stories originate of how the name came about. But there are many rumors here around where it.
So you ordered gelato and you decided, okay, it was such a good ice cream, so we just named this project like Gelato.
Potentially this might be one of the stories. But there are many rumors.
Okay, but let's make this story like this. So you mentioned several things. So I would like to know, like, what is your background? So you are like a developer originally?
So Louis and I and my co-founder and myself, we're engineers, developers. We taught ourselves how to code. Once we exited and completed our university, before Gelato, we co-founded an enterprise-focused blockchain company that was based in Berlin, where we helped one of the leading and biggest European enterprises in like the pharmaceutical space, energy space. And so on experiment with blockchain very early on. We actually built private blockchain instances for some of the largest companies in Europe before we started Gelato, which is funny because now we go back to working together with like extremely large companies and actually building not private blockchains, but permissionless public blockchains that are connected to like Ethereum and so on. So we're sort of like back where we started before Gelato, which is like interesting. Before that, we were also studying. I was studying finance, so that's why I got interested in DeFi. I was very interested in the tech and engineering, but at the same time in finance, I started trading very early on when I was like 15. And so both interests combined basically led me to exploring DeFi. And yeah, I had a lot of fun doing so.
If you could choose one challenge that was the biggest one once you've been starting the company as a founder, what would be this, and how did you overcome this challenge?
There are many, many challenges, I think, when founding a company. So it's really hard to pinpoint a single one. I think if I could choose one that might be interesting is exploring and deciding on what you want to do and what you should not be doing. I think is extremely important. And there's always this mantra of like focus on as little as few things possible, especially in crypto where there are so many opportunities and it's so noisy all around that you can oftentimes very easily forget where you want to focus on. And yeah, I think this was a hard learning that we learned at the beginning, where we sometimes maybe spread ourselves too thinly across multiple things, and then really started incorporating a culture of, hey, we need to be razor focused on the key things that we want to actually deliver to our customers, and this has helped us tremendously.
Have you had advisors from early on? Advisors, mentors?
So we have a great bunch of VCs and angel investors that we leveraged very early on. We have, for example, one of the first engineers of the Ethereum Foundation, Christopher Jensch, was an early investor in Gelato. We have the founder of Jupiter, one of the biggest decentralized exchanges on Solana, who was one of our first angel investors. The project, the founders of Gnosis, which is a project out of Berlin, who are also early advisors and investors. So we had a really great set of investors that we could always go to and ask questions, and that helped us a lot during the early days. So yeah, I think we definitely had a bunch of really, really cool and great mentors, but not like, well, they were all investors, so we didn't have like advisors or something.
If we are looking to join the Web2 ecosystem, why scalability is still a problem for rollups?
If you look at the A16Z sort of annual report for 2024, right? They try to come up with a metric of like daily active users for crypto. And what they sort of come up with, I think, is a number which is for like I think it was like 5 to 30 million daily active users for crypto worldwide, right? Which is, of course, still very small if you compare it to like the world's population, which is in the billions. And so we already know that if you look at like the chart of Base or other popular layer twos, that oftentimes they are already hitting limits when it comes to users transacting on their platform, right? And what we at Gelato believe that Web3 will be a core pillar of every company's tech stack in the future, and everyone will be interacting on chain. But just imagine, we're already running into scalability issues today for popular blockchains. Like, what would happen if we would actually onboard like a huge enterprise to route their users to blockchains? Like, all of the systems today wouldn't be able to handle it. And so we always think, the tools that we're building at Gelato, we always think, how do these systems have to look like if we 100x or 1000x our users? Like, how do these systems have to look like? We are building towards a future where everyone is on chain, and building a platform that can scale to that. And these are the challenges we're solving. And we're lucky that we work together with amazing partners such as Kraken or others that actually have a huge multi-million active user base on their platforms that they're now starting to onboard onto Web3 on chain. And there you really start to see and feel the real bottlenecks of today's technologies. And these are really the problems that we are really focused on solving.
So let's dive on the partnership with Kraken. So what was the reason of this partnership exactly, and what are the expectations of Kraken to work with you as a Gelato?
Kraken is one of the largest centralized crypto exchanges in the world, and they have active users, as I mentioned, in the millions. So they really have like millions of users actively on their platform trading crypto or buying and selling crypto. And so these are not only just active users, these are active crypto enthusiasts, right? They are like interested in crypto, they own crypto, they understand crypto, they want to make money with crypto, right? So they are the best sort of target user group you can really imagine having. And of course, I think what many companies saw in the last 18 months or so is they saw the success primarily of Base and how Base actually, as one of the leading cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, was able to create and foster an ecosystem that is driven by their own blockchain called Base, which is the blockchain of Coinbase, where they have a huge quantity of users, multi-billion-dollar worth of TVL, and a lot of like activity in lending, trading, NFTs, and etc., all happening on their own platform. And what this actually resulted in also is they are generating quite some interesting revenues that is being generated and pocketed by Coinbase, the company, right? And I think it's in the millions. It's, I think, sort of low, like 3 or 5% or something on the entire Coinbase revenue these days is actually coming from on-chain activities, right? And this is huge if you think about it, right? Like a publicly listed company makes a non-negligible part of the entire revenue based on on-chain activities, right? And this is just the beginning. They're like the first company to ever really have explored this, right? And I think this is one motivation, but the another one is actually why as a company or as an organization have a lot of users, why would you want to redirect them to another blockchain where you can't really control and work together with these users to make their life easier in terms of reducing the MEV leakage that occurs or reducing the fees they have to pay to the sequencers or whatnot. So there are a lot of advantages that come to owning your own block space. And our hypothesis is that every bigger company in the world will deploy their own chains, their own rollups. And Kraken is just one of the pioneers here to really have that had conviction about this early and are now taking full advantage of this. And why are they working together with Gelato? Because building and running and operating and scaling a blockchain is a highly complex and time-intensive endeavor that requires you to build up an entire team of infrastructure, roll-up, Web3, blockchain experts, which we were lucky that we started building 5 years ago already at Gelato, because we position ourselves as, how can we build a team that can solve one of the hardest infrastructure challenges to build scalable DeFi applications, scalable NFT applications. And so, yeah, it makes a ton of sense if you don't want to build up the entire infrastructure and the teams to work together with a project and a platform like what we built on our Gelato's rollup as a service platform. And yeah, that's the primary reason, of course, why companies like Kraken come on chain and then also work together with Gelato.
If we are talking about the future of L2s, will we have like millions of rollups? What is your opinion on that?
We have been trained to think in this world of, hey, we have like one blockchain and everyone is on this blockchain and it's supposed to scale to everyone in the world. If you are like knowledgeable about databases, if you're knowledgeable about how systems in traditional Web 2 scale, like a Facebook or like huge games, online games, for example, right? They scale horizontally with many server instances. So they build huge data centers and like put more hardware in there, and the more users they have, the more hardware they have to plug in order to actually scale. And we look at blockchains more as verifiable servers. I think how people look at blockchains have changed quite a bit. There used to be these monolithic instances where everything is sort of like put together and you deploy your application on top, and then you're just limited by the throughput of the blockchain. But today, there are like all sorts of different blockchains. There are like data availability layers, there are execution clients. Like it has become much more modular. And this modularity movement has also broken apart like how we see blockchains. And what we are now very confident in, and this is the main hypothesis of Gelato, is that we feel that for us, the blockchain is a verifiable server, and we feel that every company in the world wants to be on chain, and they will have to scale similarly how they scaled in Web 2 with many, many server instances. And many, many server instances mean they need many, many verifiable servers only for their own applications and for their own things that they are building. And they don't want to share this server. Like Facebook is not sharing a server with Google or with Amazon, right? They have their own servers because they need the space to scale. And this is how we think also Web3 will be built. And you can still have interoperability. You can still have all these systems communicate with each other via messaging protocols, and in a trustless way as well via using ZK proofs. And this is just like a very new way of how to think of blockchain scalability that is just starting out. And we are very convinced that this is how to build the future, and this is why we built Gelato. And Gelato is the platform similar to like a Google Cloud or AWS that allows you to spin up these servers instantaneously in an easy to use fashion, and also in a horizontally elastic scalable fashion. And so it looks very much like Web 2 in terms of how scalability will be achieved, but it uses all the fancy and complex Web 3 technologies such as modular blockchains, interoperability, ZK, and so on.
I know that you have also Web 2 clients, right? I would like to talk a little bit. First question is, how do you prioritize between Web 3 and Web 2 clients? And what is your perception in terms of like understanding, or obviously Web 3 is like, I think they're more understanding the future, but what is your also perception of like onboarding Web 2 clients?
In general, we are at the very early stages of Web 2 companies or more traditional enterprises entering Web 3. I think there have been some experimentations done, but now companies are really serious and are actually using blockchains in production, right? I think like a good example is BlackRock. BlackRock literally has their BUIDL token on chain where you can get exposure to US treasuries with, I'm not sure how much the TVL is today, hundreds of millions or billions even, right? But it's one of the the largest asset manager in the world is now using Ethereum and blockchains to create financial products, right? So this has happened literally in the past couple of months. Now Coinbase has their own chain. Now Kraken is coming on chain. We're working together with Fox News. And so it has started. I think the Pandora's box has been opened. And from the conversations we're having, we are talking to some of the largest tech companies in the world that are looking for building on chain as well, which might not be crypto native. They might just be very sort of traditional Web 2 companies, right? And so I think the Pandora's box has been opened, but obviously these companies that are usually much larger, publicly listed, and so on, they take a bit more time, right? It's not like they all come tomorrow. It's like a process of talking to them, onboarding them. We put in a lot of work to make this whole onboarding process as easy and as quick as possible. But of course, from their side, it still usually takes a bit of time. That's why the largest user base that we still have today, and the one that is also growing the fastest, is definitely the Web3 native sort of startup user base, which are some of our projects that use Gelato include MakerDAO, or which is now called Sky, or Aave, Infinex, and you name it, basically. Most of the large Web3 or safe For example, most of the large Web3 projects utilize Gelato services, either the rollup as a service platform or our Web3 sort of services that we deploy on existing chains. They are still by far, of course, the largest user base, but slowly and surely we see that more Web2 companies are coming on board. And I'm very excited about them because they bring a whole new set of users that is not already crypto native, right? They're bringing and they're growing the pie. And so I'm very, very eager to help them get on board.
What are the concerns that Web2 clients usually have when they are coming on chain?
There are a couple. First of all, scalability is very important for them, right? And then like, hey, we have 50 million users. Like for them, like they have more users for one product than the entire Web3 ecosystem, right? So they're like, hey, we have 50 million users here that we want to expose this product to, and this might be like a small fraction of their total user base that they want to expose this product for. Like, hey, can you actually handle this, right? So scalability is quite important. Then, of course, the reliability of the entire system is very important. Like if a big tech company, let's say Facebook as an example, right? If Facebook releases a feature into production for the users, they have to make sure that it's very reliable and it actually scales and it doesn't crash and it doesn't create a shitty experience for the users, right? So reliability, signing SLAs to have uptime guarantees and all these kind of things are very important. And this is, I think, where we are very well positioned. We underwent extreme intense like load testing and stress testing certifications and exercises at Gelato that really optimize for serving and proving to these big Web2 companies that, hey, we are actually able to uphold their standards when it comes to uptime guarantees. And we have to always understand that blockchains are still this very new technology, so it's still a bit shaky, everything, but we really put a lot of effort into making it scalable. And then, of course, compliance for especially Web2 companies is quite important. They they have legal teams, they are risk averse, they want to understand, hey, how can I be compliant? How can I be playing in this world of permissionless innovation, which is Ethereum and Web3 and smart contracts and so on. But how can I try to be as compliant as possible in the same time, right? Which is a sort of balance you have to strike. And yeah, we help projects achieve this.
I talked with many corporations, and actually number one was privacy, because they feel like why private blockchains have been like one of the rising topics, because they felt like that's how they can keep the privacy. And the second is security. What would you answer to these Web2 companies, why they need to go on chain with Gelato?
So I think there are two different things here. So one is existing companies that trying to port their existing internal processes and operations and how they maybe interface with other companies on chain, which is mostly what like these private blockchains and stuff so try to do back then, right? There, I think it will still take a bit of time to port them over, because there they have like extreme, like they have a lot of requirements around like privacy and stuff like this. These are not really like the use cases I think we are focused on right now. What I'm more bullish on is not how can companies bring their existing processes on chain, but what new things can you actually do on chain that you weren't able to do as your company, right? Base is an example. Base from Coinbase has lending markets, decentralized exchanges, perp dexes, NFT marketplaces. They have this huge set of applications that all run on their blockchain that they weren't able to get, like to build themselves, just in terms of scalability, because they're just like still a small team probably that doesn't have infinite resources. And with having their own blockchain, they're basically opening up their ecosystem or their company to invite anyone to participate and access the order flow, the user base, and the liquidity that Coinbase can direct to their blockchain in order to build some cool applications on top. So this was never ever possible before in a secure environment. Of course, as you said, security is important. Of course, security, like we sort of like take security sort of for granted, because there are a lot of great technologies out there today that make these systems that we are deploying very secure. For example, ZK, right? Zero knowledge proofs, the chains that we are running, they're all forward compatible with zero knowledge proofs. So if you want to bridge assets in and out, which is always like the riskiest thing you can do in Web3, then we usually go with DK proofs in order to verify the state transitions have been done correctly. So security is important. This is sort of what we assume is there. And yeah, we are very bullish on these new things that are enabled by blockchains for companies that haven't been able, they weren't able before to do.
You mentioned about Fox News, right? So can you tell what is the use case with Gelato that Fox News is implementing?
We all know that we are entering a world of AI, right? And there's a lot of AI generated content out there where you actually don't know, hey, has this person posted? Is the video that someone uploaded actually the person talking, right? Elon Musk got into trouble because he tweeted this video of Kamala Harris that was fake, right? And then he's like, yeah, we know it's fake, but many people don't know, right? It's impossible these days to tell. Same is true for content and websites and just seeing everything you see online. How do you know this is real? How do you know I'm real right now? Maybe I'm just an AI image of myself, right? So what Fox really tried to do is they are looking at this from like a content publisher point of view and being, of course, a media house themselves. And they try to figure out the problem. How can we create open database where every publisher that exists can attest to the content that they are creating? So if the Times that are, I think, contributing to this project from Fox post something, which is maybe like an article about like a news event happening in Gaza or something of quite politically importance, right? That there's a platform where they can actually attest that they published it, and it's not just some random AI generated content that someone else tries to pursue you that is true, right? And so they are using blockchains, again, as like a verifiable server, how we like to describe it, to enable every publisher to post these attestations to the contents that they're publishing. And as a user, you can then see and say, hey, the private key of let's say the New York Times or the private key of Fox signed this key, this hash, which is this attestation to the content that was published. And this way you can be sure, like, hey, this is actually a content piece that originated from this publisher. And so it's actually a pretty cool use case. I think it's a very timely use case in the world of AI as well. And it's also not like a pure financial use case, which I find quite exciting. And so, yeah, that's why I'm actually super, super happy that we can work together with them.
How do you see in terms of like use cases, like how each company will be launching their own chains in the future?
I'm pretty sure that in 5 years from now, I can't even predict the use cases that are happening. I think for the foreseeable future, most of them will still be quite DeFi focused, enabling users or enabling companies to create financial products that are transparent, that are secure, that are non-custodial on their own blockchains, redirecting their users to it, redirecting liquidity to their blockchain, and facilitating all these financial agreements, right? It was never as easy as it is today for any company that has users to create financial products to service them. You literally just have to spin up a blockchain. You can create a lending market that you can take the code, fork, put on there, and then you need to put liquidity in there, and then that's basically it. And then of course some smaller details here and there, but you can imagine that any company can now do lending, they can now do trading, they can now do this. Every fintech company can do this. They will probably be the first adopters of this, right? I like centralized exchanges like that are first movers. Then I believe like many fintech companies will come in, like a Robinhood or like a Revolut or like some others. Maybe very like modern neo banks will come in, and then tech companies that are tech affiliated, right? And then the very like rest of the world, right? For them, it will still take some time because they might not be interested in offering financial use cases. But we believe, like we see already that China with WeChat and another kind like Grab in Singapore or whatnot, these apps, these social apps, financial apps, they're sort of fusing with each other quite a bit. And everyone really wants to own the entire stack, financial services, tech, social. And you can combine these things together on your own blockchain and really provide great financial services with like very low operational costs. And this is really where DeFi shines. Like DeFi is basically the operational cost of running a lending market or lending offering is 99% cheaper than in traditional financial world, right? It's crazy. So this is where it shines. So I think these will be the first use cases, but then like Fox has, like other people have, like IP rights and monetizing IP rights and delegating and stuff. There are a lot of other use cases that are being explored right now. But yeah, we'll see how they are picking up over the next couple of years.
So I would like just to understand. So, so you're building rollups on Ethereum. How do you think the multiple rollups make the impact on the Ethereum ecosystem?
Monolithic blockchains, or this world that we started our blockchain journey in, which was Ethereum is the world computer and it can scale, or hey, Polkadot comes in and scales, or hey, Solana comes in and we all build on Solana. I think this time is over. I think people are now accepting the fact that you cannot scale to the world by having a single server that is shared and run by a set of nodes that all have to come to consensus on all the execution of all of this. That paradigm is I think slowly being understood to be infeasible. And so the only way that we see Web3 can scale to like a size of Web2 is similar to Web2 in a horizontal, scalable way, where you can add servers and add compute over and over in order to have thousands and millions of rollups. And companies should have, we believe companies will have multiple rollups eventually. They have multiple blockchains. A company might run on 10 different or 100 different blockchains eventually if they need to scale, right? Like Facebook runs on millions of servers today. They don't run on one server, they run on millions of servers. So we believe the same will happen in Web2. And Ethereum and Vitalik himself, like it's not like I am inventing this, right? It's I think we are very convinced, and we see and we have the abilities to execute on building a platform that builds towards that vision. But like it was Vitalik himself that put out a paper called the Rollup-Centric Roadmap, or a blog post at some point, which illustrated and introduced this topic. And the impact for Ethereum is that Ethereum has to change. Right now, the applications on Ethereum, there are a lot of people paying a lot of fees to get included in an Ethereum block. But we believe that there shouldn't be anyone actually transacting on Ethereum. There shouldn't be any apps on Ethereum. Ethereum should just be a layer which you can post transactions to that get processed and sequenced by Ethereum to guarantee you censorship resistance and fast finality and fast inclusion. And that enables you to verify proofs that enable you to tap into maybe ETH, the asset that is issued by Ethereum, to get it out to another blockchain to then use it in an application, for example. This is this sort of hyper modular future for Ethereum that we believe has to move to. This also means that the value capture for Ethereum will be different than it is today. But I think it's already happening, and a lot of people say, like, are L2s parasitic to Ethereum? Is Ethereum still capturing all the value? I always like to question, like, Ethereum shouldn't capture all the value. Like, Ethereum shouldn't, like, the applications and the users, they should get the value. The infrastructure and the networks themselves, they should be extracting the least amount of value possible. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure our base layers that guarantee censorship resistance and decentralization, like Ethereum, are valued sufficiently that they are impossible to attack, or that we can build these systems in a resilient way that they cannot be attacked or taken over by centralized entities. But then the value really should accrue to applications and their users. And this is I think what is changing and what people are realizing now, and they don't know how to price this into ETH. But I think this is way too complex. Like, Ethereum, if everyone still uses Ethereum as an asset is still one of the primary assets that get traded on all of these financial applications. And like Bitcoin doesn't have cash flows. Bitcoin is just like mining, and people still value it because people like the asset a lot, and it's a great one to keep, and there's a narrative around it. I think the same has happened for Ethereum, and I think it will happen for Ethereum. And it's just like a bit different to how many people think about it today.
I have so many questions actually to continue, but okay, one more question. What is your opinion on the Bitcoin ecosystem on the L2s right now?
Bitcoin, the asset, exists and is valued a lot. And again, because it's a pure store of value, simple asset that people use and hold and maybe use as collateral for like some sort of financial applications. But it's not really, because Bitcoin itself is a programmable blockchain where you can do a lot of different stuff, right? Bitcoin is actually, the cool thing about Bitcoin is that it's very hard to change and it sort of remains very rigid. And like governments these days are confident in like holding Bitcoin because they're like, we believe that Bitcoin just won't tomorrow vanish or change. Like we can plan years ahead and have the confidence that it will stay the same. This is the value proposition of Bitcoin, which is a great value proposition. Like who can have this value proposition? It's basically impossible to get this value proposition, right? And so this is great for Bitcoin. And I think it's flawed to think of, like, it's flawed to try to shoehorn too much into Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is great how it is. You can improve it and you might be able to make accessing Bitcoin outside of the Bitcoin blockchain more efficient and less trusted by including some sort of precompiles and opcodes and whatever in the Bitcoin protocol and make it easier to verify, let's say, proofs of stuff. This might be a benefit at some point, but at the end of the day, Ethereum or like applications will be built on their own rollups and their own blockchains. And Bitcoin is a protocol that issues an asset, which is the BTC asset, and that's for me it. And they're doing a great job. And as long as you can transfer it out of Bitcoin a bit, it will be fine. And yeah, I think that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your opinions. So my last questions I usually ask for the advice for the founders, but this time I'm actually want to ask you something about for investors. So as a Web3 infrastructure project, where do you think the next opportunity lies for investors in infrastructure in blockchain?
Of course, this is a bit biased, right, for sort of like the vision that we are working towards. But I think I mentioned multiple times here that I feel like there will be a shift in how people think about blockchains and how they're built and where applications are built. I feel everyone will have their own blockchain or even multiple blockchains, and that you outsource certain dependencies to external networks like Ethereum or like a Celestia, for example, the A and so on. But this has a huge impact on value capture as well. Like where will the value actually sort of trickle down? And we see the first applications like pump.fun and so on appear that actually generate a huge revenue as just an application. I think this will continue to happen. So yeah, in a world where applications have their own chains and their own users and their own liquidity and their own apps, how do you model and value chains that do not have this anymore and that are still sort of stuck in this old world of how systems are being built? And yeah, what projects are out there that are building towards this new world? I think would be an interesting investor hypothesis. And what tools? Imagine you have a million rollups. What things are there that are very important to be figured out? Bridging, interoperability, these kind of things, right? They will become increasingly important. UX, right? How can we abstract different chains away and so on? So there are all these things that you can think of as an investor in that sort of worldview that I think are very interesting to look at.
Well, thank you so much. It was a fantastic conversation. Very interesting what Gelato is building. Very interesting also use cases with Kraken and Fox News. So I would love to prompt the audience to follow Gelato to check what actually you're building. Also the founders to check because you might actually accelerate their building very fast as well. And also, of course, check out your own social media and follow. And of course, subscribe to this podcast because we are bringing even more interesting conversations to this podcast and chat. And subscribe, like, and all the links will be below. So thank you so much.
Thank you.